Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Yosefu, and today I will be going over some Maya for beginner basics. It's going to be split up into three different parts. The first part is going to be the menu bars and shelves. The second part is going to be the viewer. And then the third part is going to be the animation bar and script editor. Hello, and we're going to go ahead and start with the menu bar at the top here. Basically, you have the file where you can open a scene, save scene, increment and save. You can export to another program like ZBrush or Modo or whichever program you prefer. You can also set your project and you have project windows, and then you have all of these others. If you'd like, I can make a video just on these menu bars alone, but for now, basically just going over what the interface is, so all of the things up here. So the next part we have is going to be the menu set. You can change your menu sets depending on what it is that you're doing. So if you see here how you have these certain displays at the top, once you change this, it's going to change what tools you have access to. So if you change to animation, it's going to give you keying, visualizations, deformers, constraints. If you go to effects, it's going to give you fluids, end cloth, end hair, etc. And then rendering is going to give you what you need for shading, lighting, and texturing. So, and if you prefer a video on that as well, I can go over all of that and actually go into these individually. So the next thing we have is just your typical file icons. You can start a new scene. You can open a scene that you may have already had saved. You can go back to save scene. This is undo last action. You can do this if you really want to. I prefer using the Z key. I think it works a lot better. This up here is basically also part of the menu bar. These are snapping tools. These allow you to snap to either vertices or faces or other things like that. These are basically component types. Like I said, there's a lot of other things that we can go over. These are your rendering options. These allow you to open the render view. It's going to depend on what rendering source that you're using, but depending on what you're using, you'll have that. And we can go over that in another video as well, going over render settings and the hypershade and a lot of other things. So next we have, let's see, we have underneath here these are shelves. You can create custom shelves if you'd like. That'd be another video for another time where you can actually create some of your own once you learn how to get familiar with Maya and continue to go in and learn the program. But these allow you to basically make things quickly. So if you click that, it'll automatically create an object in the middle of the scene, which is pretty nice. There is a setting where you can do it where you can automatically scale it, but I have it to where it just does a predetermined scale, and then I can adjust it afterwards. So this is what I do for now. And like I said, we can go over a lot of these other things later. We can go over like a modeling tutorial or other things like that. So, and that's basically, okay, so yeah, I almost forgot. So you have over here, these are basically your workspaces. When you change these, it's going to change the entire outlook of the way this looks. I'm not going to change it, but that's basically what it'll do. If you change it, well, I guess let's do it once. If you change it to modeling standard, it's going to give you all the tools you would, technically need for modeling, and if you go to sculpting, it's going to give you sculpting tools and things like that. So it's basically a quick way to go in and do to have that workspace. But I prefer to just keep it as Maya Classic, and then I'll customize it myself and make things do it the way I want to do it. So these are actually very important icons over here on the right. These are your channel boxes. So over here off to the right, this is where your channel box is and your layer editor. You can turn it off and on. I recommend leaving it on. So this is your hide tools. You can dock these tools just by dragging them over. Sorry, not dragging them over, but let me see here. Sorry. You're supposed to be able to do it, but it's not working for some reason. But you can dock it. Okay, so you have your show and hide tools. You have the attribute editor. This will bring up the attribute editor over here. I prefer to put it right over here. So if you drag it like this, it'll put it off to the side. I prefer to have them over here. So that's what I do. So you basically just drag it. And if you want to take it out and make it free, just pull it out, just wiggle it, and it works. So that's what I do. And this is a newer tool. It's maybe since like 2018, I think. It's a modeling tool set, so it gives you access to all of these tools to make modeling significantly faster. It's definitely a nice tool to get into. So other than that, that's basically it for the top half here. So we'll go on to the second part now, which is the viewer. There's quite a lot in the viewer. I'll just go over some of the basics. These are the basic selection tools. So you can, lasso tool, paint tool, and it'll all depend on your object. So, for instance, if you select a square or a cube, excuse me, and, you go to vertex, you can select lasso, and you can select those vertexes within that lasso, and you can, hold control and do that. And then you have, the move tool with the rotate and scale. I prefer to use the quick keys for that. And we can go over that for another time as well, but that's what I usually prefer to do is I'll use quick keys. I don't click over here, but for the beginning you could do it that way if you want to. So within the viewer, we'll go ahead and start over here actually. So you have the view here. This is how you can bring in like an image plane or something like that if you prefer. Under shading, so if you bring in a tool or if you bring in an object, you can change the shading. So if you want it to be see-through, or if you want it to be wireframe when you're not selecting it, so you can still see through it, it can help with a lot of different things. It really just depends on your preference. I like to keep this at default lighting. It really depends on what you're doing. I always keep this unless you really don't want to see certain things. You can turn some things off, like the grid or whatever. And then the renderer, depending on what you're doing, sometimes I'll go between V-Ray or the regular viewport. It depends on what renderer you're using. And then these are the panels. This allows you to go in and choose between, perspective, orthographic, front, side. And you can set up quick keys for those as well. But sometimes you could do it through here. And you can also create your own views and name them. And you can tear it off if you have multiple screens, so you can work in multiple screens at the same time instead of trying to do it all within here. So you have here where you can select the cameras. These are basically camera options here, camera attributes. You can bring in an image plane as well from here. You can do a 2D pan and zoom. You have a pencil where you can actually draw directly onto an object. So it comes in handy if you're trying to mark something or do something. And then you have these here, which basically, when it comes to rendering, this will basically give you, the resolution gate, and then film gate, and then gate mask. So, and you can edit the color within the attributes, and we can go over that another time as well. So, let's see. So, after that, you have, similar to what we were looking at in the shading, you can do that through here as well. So, if you want, you can do, it's basically completely 100% no shading. Or you can bring it in and have it shaded. It's still an X-ray, so I would have to change that in the shading settings. But and then you can do wireframe unshaded. And then this actually will activate textures. So if you have any textures on there, you turn them on and off. I don't currently have any textures. And then also lighting. And then if you prefer, depending on how well your computer works, you could turn on shadows and things like that. But I prefer to turn a lot of that stuff off just in case you have a really, really heavy scene. And you can, I don't prefer to mess with these. These adjust the, your exposure and your gamma. You probably don't want to mess with those. You can do that later on once you're rendering and doing other things. But so for me personally, I don't mess with that. So let's cancel out of that tool. So remove this. And all right, so it's also inside the viewer, you have these panel layouts. So you can have the full screen layout, which we currently are in. If you push Shift Spacebar, or excuse me, not Shift Spacebar, but if you go to Spacebar, it'll also bring up these menus for you to choose from, and we can go over that another time as well. So you have this, which will open multiple views, so you can see your perspective, top, down, front, side, or you can do, side to side, or you can open up your outliner, which is good. I always prefer to have it open. I'll usually do an outliner with this view. That way, and then if I need to, I can open up another screen and then pull it off to the side and then do it that way. So within the viewer, you can do a lot of different things once you have objects selected and things like that. And once we go, if we end up doing any kind of modeling or anything like that, tutorials, I'll go over all of that stuff so you can see that and see what tools are needed for that. So as far as that goes, that's it for the viewer. The next part is the animation window. So down here, it basically has a frame range that's set by this bar right here. You can make the bar bigger or smaller, and you can actually edit as well. So if you want to go more than 200 frames, you can select 400, and then you can make it so that you have, you can have 400 frames. So it depends on what you want to do. You can pause, play from here. And now for the settings themselves, you can, if you right click within the time slot here, you can change different settings, the playback speed, whether you do it by frame, real time. It really depends on what you're doing. And then the play blast is basically, it'll play a video of whatever you have in the scene. It's pretty cool. And we can go over a lot of this stuff at another time. So yeah, you have this range here, and then you also have your frames. So depending on what you're doing, I prefer to just keep it at 24 frames per second. I mean, if you honestly need to do something that's a higher frame range, you can do it through here, but I wouldn't recommend doing that. You can set it to where it continuously loops, where it continue to play. I believe there's an option to make it do what's called a bounce, where it'll go forward and back, so you can see it back and forth. And then you also have this auto keyframe toggle. We can go over animation in another video, but this can be good and bad. It depends on what you're doing. Sometimes you really don't want auto keyframes depending on what you're doing. And then you have your animation preferences. This opens the time slider information, so you can do this other things in here manually. The keyframes, how often you want the key tick size, playback speed, which viewers are going to be active, if you want it to loop, oscillate, etc. So, and at the bottom here, you have the Mel script. That's if you want to have any custom stuff that you want to type in. And then you have the script editor. The script editor can be overwhelming, especially when you're actually trying to write things. This basically shows everything that you've actually done. Anytime you make a selection or click on something or whatever, it'll actually show you in here. So you have like polysphere, and it shows you the coordinates and all those other things. And that's definitely for another class. That's that's a little bit more advanced, but it's good to know that this is where it puts everything. So if you ever want to see something or go back in and see what you did or where you were at, you can go through here once you get a good idea of this. And this is where the Mel script is in Python. So now, so as far as the basics of the interface goes, that's pretty much it. There are quite a few other things you could go into. Like up here, you have a lot of the different tabs that you can choose, depending on. Also, it's kind of similar to this one, but these are just more quick select icons where you can just go in and click them, and they'll pop into the viewer here, depending on what you're doing, whether it's creating a camera or anything like that. Creating curves and things like that. It really depends on the person and what your workflow is, but I'll usually just change it through here depending on what I need. And then if I need to, I'll go into one of these and choose one. Or I'll go into the menu directly, I'll go into rendering, and then I'll do something within shading and lighting, and so on and so forth. So, so that's it for the interface. I hope this video was helpful and you got something out of it. If you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. I'm going to start trying to put out as many videos as possible, and go ahead and put anything in the comments on what you might want to see in a tutorial, and I'd be more than happy to make a video on it and try to help in any way I can. I know sometimes Maya can be sometimes overwhelming, and sometimes I think there's not a lot of stuff out there just for the more beginner stuff, and I'd be more than happy to go in and try to give people that insight and the understanding that they would need to learn Maya. So thank you again, and thanks for watching.